Good evening, welcome. Slow news day today. I don't know what we're going to talk about. So, a couple of things just to start off with, and I think what we'll talk about is what I've got up here, because there's been a bit of a conspiracy theory going around today. It's all very exciting. Ultimately nothing in it, but it is still very exciting. But I will just explain, as I explained as a comment as a result of the impromptu live stream I did on Thursday. Unfortunately, it's sometimes nice and sometimes not. Unfortunately, the lighting I have in this room, there's no room to put artificial lights or to block out real light, so the lighting is entirely down to the sun. And as I told someone earlier in the week, I am fully focused on winning the Euro Millions lottery. I will work on trying to command the universe later. I will also just say I'm getting a message saying streaming quality may drop, so hopefully it will still be okay, but just in case something happens, it's having a bit of an issue. So let us see. So we had, I don't know how many people are aware of this. So obviously, right, after Boris Johnson resigned on Thursday and didn't use the term resign, he didn't say I am resigning, and people are thinking, oh, he hasn't really resigned. And it's really not just me, it's been very, very clear on the part of constitutional legal experts. Boris Johnson has resigned. There's nothing he can do about it. If he changes his mind, there's nothing he can do about it. But then what happened is this email popped up. Now this is from a journalist. There's no reason to doubt that this journalist is playing silly buggers. And she said, a source at number 10 tells me that Boris Johnson intends to step down as Prime Minister on Monday in order to run for the Tory leadership. To which there's several things to have thought. First of all, he can't. The Tory party rules here say a leader resigning from the leadership of the party is not eligible for re-nomination in the consequent leadership election. And some people are saying, but he didn't really resign, did he? What if he didn't really resign? He didn't really resign. He did resign because there's a leadership contest. If he hadn't resigned, there wouldn't be a leadership contest. And the other thing is, so let's say Boris Johnson thinks he has a cunning plan and he's created this little loophole, right? Created this little loophole. What good does it do? First of all, who decides ultimately whether he's actually resigned? It's not Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson is no part of this. Who decides? The 1922 Executive Committee. And who's going to be on that 1922 Executive Committee? I actually don't know, because there's elections for it right now that finish on Monday. But I'll tell you who it's not going to be: a load of his allies. So they will basically say, if he tries to argue some loophole, they'll go, yeah. Then let's go down. Let's say he somehow did persuade them. First of all, is he going to find himself on that final ballot? Remember, it has to be whittled down, so there's only 2 left. Is he going to find himself on the final ballot? Not very likely. MPs want him gone now. Let's say he did. It's possible. Let's say he did. Then it goes to the members. Are the members going to vote for him? Because all Boris Johnson would do is take away votes from the Boris Johnson continuity candidates. So in actual fact, he'd be helping Rishi Sunak, which I'm quite sure he doesn't want to do. So let's say it's, Boris Johnson and the anti-Boris Johnson on the ticket. The members will just vote for the anti-Boris Johnson. And let us say they didn't. At the moment, it's not like all Tory party members don't want Boris Johnson anymore. There's a hefty number that still wanted him to stay. Let's say they still vote him in. That's fine by me, because then the Tories are stuck with Boris Johnson yet again. The public get extra pissed off with the Conservatives. We win the next election, no contest. So all of this is brilliant. But unfortunately, or fortunately, depends on your point of view, none of it is true. Downing Street, I'm sorry if you can hear a child screaming. It's the thing. And I've got to have the door open because it's absolutely roasting in here. I can't have the cooler on because it'll mess about with the mic. So unfortunately, we have to put up with the feral child. And occasionally the odd pug who might be curious and come inside. And there I can hear one of them. So yeah, it's not going to happen. He has resigned. He's clearly resigned. Downing Street did later rule it out, but obviously we don't take any attention to that. Boris Johnson lies. His spokespeople lie. I did like David Gauke's comment here. So if you don't know who David Gauke is, he was a minister in Theresa May's government. He was one of the MPs that Boris Johnson basically withdrew the whip from, so he wasn't allowed to stand as a candidate. He may have voluntarily stepped down actually, but he certainly wasn't going to be allowed to stand as a Tory candidate in 2019. And he says, I suppose it's possible Johnson hadn't checked the rules. In other words, Johnson might have thought he had a cunning plan. Everyone should have kept quiet about this until after the PM resigned on Monday and then point it out. But there we go. Didn't John Major fight a leadership challenge whilst he was PM? Yeah, well, almost every Conservative leader stretching back as far long as I've been alive has faced a leadership challenge. Margaret Thatcher won one, and then I think it was a year later, she still actually technically won her second one. She did technically win, but back then it wasn't a simple you needed more than 50%. If you didn't get above a certain threshold, it would go to a second round, and it was felt that she would probably lose there. So she resigned before it went to that second round. So technically Margaret Thatcher didn't actually lose a confidence vote, but she did resign as a result of a confidence vote that was looking like going a bit badly for her. John Major basically dared the Conservatives to trigger, so he basically triggered his own confidence vote. He dared the Conservatives to bring one against him. They did, and he won it. Who was next? I don't think William Hague did. Ian Duncan Smith did, and he lost. He's an idiot. Why did they ever make him leader? My goodness me. He did. He lost. I don't know. I can't remember what happened with Michael Howard. David Cameron didn't, but Theresa May did. And again, she technically didn't lose. She won her first one, would have lost the second, but resigned before that happened. Boris Johnson won the first one, would have lost the second, but resigned before it happened. So there's actually a long history of Conservative leaders facing votes of no confidence, sorry I'm gone blurry again, and winning them, but stepping down anyway. John Major did not step down anyway. He probably should have. But there we go. Anyway, so that's that. All very interesting. I'll tell you what the story is, though. Boris Johnson, before I go into some questions, sorry, I'll just go over this. It says, Boris Johnson retreats to Chequers as he considers leaving politics at next election. So it's suggesting here that he's not going to step down as an MP once he's replaced as Prime Minister. Now, that sounds loopy to me for several reasons. First of all, Boris Johnson hates having to declare his financial interests. Hates it. So why would he stay on as an MP? He gets a very, very generous, and I mean a very generous severance package as Prime Minister. I think I saw somewhere today, I need to check on this, don't quote this, I need to check the veracity of it. But I gather that a former Prime Minister gets £115,000 a year, basically pension for life, for having been a former Prime Minister. I didn't know it was that much. That's 2/3 of his salary for being Prime Minister. Who wouldn't love to quit a job on 2/3 of your salary for life? Where else was it? Oh yeah, someone mentioned there Ted Heath. Ted Heath faced a confidence vote and lost to Margaret Thatcher. To be fair though, with Ted Heath it was a very different kettle of fish. Ted Heath lost an election. The Tories do not like their leaders losing elections, and he refused to step down. Normally a Tory MP, not always, but normally a Tory MP would step down if they lose a general election. He didn't. So yes, he was ousted by Thatcher. But anyway, yes, I don't believe this because, well, I'm not saying I don't believe it as it won't happen, but I find it difficult to believe because Boris Johnson will find it uncomfortable being an MP because of the scrutiny still. The Privileges Committee investigation is not going to stop just because he's not Prime Minister. It's now law. Parliament's voted for that investigation to happen. Voted for it. It's going to happen. Unless, I suppose, Tory MPs try and vote to stop it now. But why? So that's going to go ahead. If they find him guilty, he's probably going to be disgraced anyway. And there's still, you know, it's not. It says in the article he's going to do it to try and avoid an unnecessary by-election. But two things. First of all, if Boris Johnson goes, the Conservatives have got a decent chance of winning that by-election. Secondly, there's probably going to be a by-election anyway. Because if he's found guilty by the Privileges Committee, if they recommend a hefty suspension, unless Tory MPs vote against it, which why would they, he's gone anyway. There'll be a recall petition which will pass, and then he's gone. But anyway, right, let's try and catch up with some comments. Cameron promised a referendum. Is this the Brexit? He had loads of referendums. You may have to narrow it down. We may think this is a Brexit referendum. Promised a referendum in the belief he would be coalition with the Lib Dems. Yes, it is. And then break the promise and blame the Lib Dems. Is Starmer doing the same thing? I think not. Although I do keep saying, and it is worth saying, that because Labour are unlikely to win a majority, and ignore all the polling at the moment that says, oh, if there was a general election right now, Labour would win a majority. First of all, the basis for these polls is not always great. I don't believe that they can really say that. Second, there isn't a general election right now. The thing about general elections is you have about 6 weeks worth of campaigning beforehand, and that changes the polling. The polling always changes during the actual campaign. Otherwise, if it didn't, people wouldn't spend so much money on campaigns. So Labour stunningly unlikely to get a majority, which means of course they will not be able to stick to every manifesto promise, which means of course whatever Brexit position they have may need to soften a little bit. But the other thing I'll say is this: Labour's Brexit position is not a hard Brexit position. It's not even a soft Brexit position. It's a reverse Brexit position. If you look at the language, it doesn't seem so. If you look at the promises, it absolutely does. Like, what are Labour promising to do? They're promising standards alignment. You know, they're promising security agreements with the EU. They're promising some individual deals for touring performers and so on. It won't just be performers, it'll be people doing short-term work, because they've said they will do the same thing for EU citizens. It'll be entirely they're not trying to cherry pick or anything. You know, it's aimed at a deal that says, look, you know, EU citizens would be able to come to this country for short-term work, and, you know, like performing or setting up exhibitions or something like that, or training. You know, so there's various things in their promises that are basically reversing Brexit, and none of them can be done quickly because all of them need an agreement with the EU. And because they need an agreement with the EU, ultimately they need legal documentation drafting, and it needs to be passed by the EU Parliament. None of that's a quick thing. So the actual meat, if you ignore the rhetoric, if you just take away the rhetoric, the meat of Labour's Brexit policy is reversal of Brexit. It's just not promising to reverse the whole thing in 5 years. It's suggesting they will never fully reverse it. Forget it. Of course they will. Well, if they don't, it's only because another government that's not them does it before them. But anyway, who would Starmer like to fight a general election against? Right, well, obviously over the next week I will be going through my thoughts on exactly this, but let's just spitball for now. I think Rishi Sunak would be their preferred candidate. I'll tell you why. I think, first of all, he will try and argue that his time as Chancellor was largely dictated by orders from Boris Johnson, but he was still Chancellor. He's promising right now to fix the economy. Who was Chancellor when it broke? Who's been Chancellor for the last 2 and a bit years? So Labour will love that. Rishi Sunak will, of course, try and say, oh, it wasn't me. And the thing is, by the time the election comes around, he'll have been Chancellor for 2 and a bit years. He'll have also been Prime Minister for 2 and a bit years. Will the economy be better? Will it bollocks? So Rishi Sunak would be a really good one to come against, as well as all the individual little scandals. He's non-dom. He's believed to be getting out of, about him and his wife, 100 million quid's worth of taxes, British taxes, right? Because of the way. So they can't say that they're committed to the country. Rishi Sunak, it's not just about his wife's financial affairs. His own financial affairs is not entirely transparent. either. Then there's that whole US green card issue, which he's tried to brush off. Labour are not going to let him brush that off. You know, there's all sorts of things you can pick on with Rishi Sunak. And I'll tell you another thing that's in Labour's favour. The far right, if any of you have been watching social media today, the far right, like the GBBs and all that lot, all that crew, Spectator crew and all them, they're knives out for Rishi Sunak. They're not going to... The way I look at it is this. While Boris Johnson's been Prime Minister, if you take the Times, for example, which is like a broadsheet Tory supporting newspaper, and they backed the Tories in the general election, they didn't turn on them, but they've never been a fan of Boris Johnson. They have published, and they continue to publish, a lot of very critical articles on Boris Johnson, right? You imagine the likes of GB News and Daily Mail and the Daily Express doing the same thing with Rishi Sunak as Chancellor, as a Prime Minister, sorry. So, yeah, I think Labour's preferred is Rishi Sunak, but I think they'd be very happy with Liz Truss as well, because ultimately Liz Truss, they can attack her for a whole range of other things. Her history in cabinet, they probably won't be able to attack they will have to, but they won't be able to attack it very strongly. She will claim to have carried out a dozen or more post-Brexit trade deals. It's all crap, of course, but she'll say it and people will believe it. She'll say that she's been instrumental in supporting Ukraine as Foreign Secretary. It's bollocks. She'll say it. She'll get away with it. But she's an idiot. She is an idiot. In PMQ, Starmer will... The way I look at it is this. If I go back to when Keir Starmer first became Labour leader, his first opponent in PMQs was Dominic Raab, because Boris Johnson at the time was dying of COVID because the idiot kept going around not observing mitigations. And Starmer completely stitched up Dominic Raab. Now, admittedly, he also stitched up Boris Johnson in the first few as well, until Boris Johnson started just brazenly lying his way through them all. And just, instead of letting himself get tied in knots, he just would blazingly go, no. And he would distract, he'd talk about something else. So he adapted. Liz Truss won't be able to adapt. So Starmer will absolutely destroy. And I hate to use that because you see it on the internet. So person X destroys person Y. What they actually mean is person X said a thing you agree with and person Y said a thing you don't agree with. But objectively, Starmer will destroy Truss. And then you think about, oh, that's just PMQs. Well, people don't always see that. They'll see the live television debates when it comes to the general election, and he'll destroy her there as well. So I say Liz Truss is the most likely candidate. She's best for Starmer, will expose her lack of intelligence. She's certainly a good one. Yeah, Travelling Musician said there Ben Wallace is not standing yet. I noticed that before my video, unfortunately, at 5 o'clock went out, but too late to do anything about it because I'd already upended the studio to try and do a bit of rearranging. It was a bit annoying. It was a bit selfish, really, announcing that before I, after I recorded it and uploaded it before I could do anything about it. Wallace is a silent snake, maybe. I think the main issue with Wallace, I think, to be fair, I'm perfectly happy to accept that it was just he didn't want to put his family through it. He's got 3 kids, and it's not a nice, if you're focused on your family, it's not a pleasant life being Prime Minister with a family. Quite frankly, I don't know how Tony Blair put up with it in terms of, because he's quite close to his family, of course. But of course, he was very, very ambitious, I suppose. Ben Wallace may be, well, he's obviously a cabinet minister. He's got that level of ambition, but maybe not for the goldfish bowl of Downing Street. So I'm quite happy to think kindly on Ben Wallace's motivations, but ultimately, probably it was just a case that is too boring. Like I said in the video, now how does, objectively, he's done a good job as Defence Secretary. It's not to say you can't pick faults, but he's done a good job as Defence Secretary this year and last year, right? Cross-party support. It's not just, he has. And then you think to yourself, so if he's one of the few cabinet ministers that's done a genuinely good job, how is he not better known in the public? Why is he not better regarded? Because he's very bad at PR. Or he doesn't care about PR. Either way, he wouldn't be a good one for Prime Minister. Because unfortunately, it's You know, you would think that what you want out of a prime minister is someone who's intelligent, wise, benevolent and focused on the job. Actually, what you need is someone who's really good at campaigning and on your side. So anyway, so this is an interesting one. The time of no confidence. I'll read the comment above it first, sorry. I read some Tory voters saying that their party should campaign the next election, saying voting for the Lab Lib Pact will put the UK back in the EU. Let them. People are... The thing is, if they do that, I absolutely would let them do that. And the reason is, and this is where they'll fall flat on their ass. What they're failing to understand, some of them understand this, what they're failing to understand is the reason why Get Brexit Done was such a powerful slogan. It wasn't for all the Brexit fans. It was for all the ones sick of Brexit. They just wanted it over. It's like being tortured. They'll sign the confession. I'll put my X in the Tory box. Just make it stop. They're sick of it. They're still sick of it now. They're more sick of it now because as far as the general population is concerned, it's been done. Boris Johnson kept saying he got Brexit done. It's done. Stop going on about it. If the Conservatives keep banging on about it in the next election, Labour are going to be the party that says we've moved on. And it'll infuriate rejoiners, but that's what they're going to say, and it's going to be the right thing to say. Because then they can be the party of, we don't have to carry on banging on about Brexit if you vote for us. The Tories want to be the forever Brexit party. Let them try. It is not a strategically wise move. And I'll tell you something, if there's a lot of Tories right now want to fight on their election, I'll tell you what they won't be doing. Because if the Tory party, as they always do, pay top dollar for the best political strategies, the first thing those political strategists will tell them is shut up about Brexit. That is what they'll say to them. If they manage to get any decent political strategists into their campaign at the next election, they will tell them shut up about Brexit. Wallace could have got his kids to draw over the wallpaper, improve the decor somehow. I'm not going to feel sorry for anyone who replaces Boris Johnson. I am going to have a little bit of sympathy for the headaches they're going to get in that flat. I assume that as Boris Johnson's donor financed 85% of the cost of that refurbishment, he'll probably haul the furniture away with him because he'll consider it his, but the decor will still be there. Two more asking about Mordaunt now. Right, well, have I found out why the book is like Mordaunt yet? I have no idea. She hasn't announced she's standing, as far as I can tell, unless it's happened while I've been live. I don't know on what basis. Or I'll tell you all I know about Penny Mordaunt. Two things I know about her. First, she's a massive fan of homeopathy. Second, she has been one of the ministers who's been involved in trying to persuade the United States to move towards a trade deal. Obviously, she's also been involved in the trade deals with like Australia, New Zealand, you know, things like that. So she can try and claim that she's been doing some work on the post-Brexit trade deals, but she wasn't the cabinet minister for it, so she won't be able to claim ultimate responsibility. And all she's really going to be saying is she will sell our, if she's going to be involved in trade negotiations, she will sell our market access in return for us being able to sell slightly smelly water. That's all I know about her, in all honesty. I mean, in terms of her politics, she's fairly moderate. But then, to be fair, Boris Johnson, you wouldn't believe it, would you? People think Boris Johnson is really on the far right. He's not on the far right wing at all. Boris Johnson, in terms of his own personal politics, is quite a moderate. The reason why he became the leader of such a far right government was because it was the far right in the party calling the shots. And Boris Johnson didn't have enough of a backbone to inject his own politics into the role. He just wanted to be Prime Minister. But Boris Johnson is, in terms of his own politics, fairly moderate. You know, he would never have chosen to bring in laws to try and stop Steve Bray protesting, for example. He wouldn't have brought in, these voter suppression laws either. All of these weren't his ideas. He just did them. He didn't resist them. He don't care as long as he can be Prime Minister, but he wouldn't choose them. So Penny Mordaunt may be the same thing. She's considered a bit of a moderate. Some people look at her and go, okay, you know, she might be in like the Jeremy Hunt type mould. But she will dance to the tune of the far right in the party if she wishes to have an easy ride as Prime Minister. I can't rule anything out, but at the moment, the way and the bookies must know something, but I don't know what. You know, she hasn't announced she's standing. She's not well known in the public. She'd be a massive gamble. Like, what? How do they know she can campaign? She couldn't even campaign herself a position in cabinet. Like, Jeremy Hunt can always argue he was in cabinets under more sensible prime ministers than Boris Johnson. He just refused to serve in Boris Johnson's cabinet. It's not even true. He did say he would serve in Boris Johnson's cabinet if it was a senior role like Foreign Secretary. He just didn't want to take a demotion. So no, I'm afraid I'm drawing a blank with Penny Mordaunt. I don't see it. But then it's not up to me. It's up to 360 or 358 Tory MPs to decide who credibly ends up on that final ballot. Now, if I knew which two were going to end up on the final ballot, I reckon I could have a decent guess as to who the members would vote for. But I don't know who's going to be on. I don't know who Tory MPs want to back. Is Zahawi still a dark horse? Because I understand he has a history of financial scandals. He absolutely does. Ordinarily, I'd say Zahawi has no chance. But if you look at the others, it's such a weak field that I absolutely think that. And Zahawi hasn't announced his standing yet, but he will. He should, unless he's definitely thinking about it. So unless he's persuaded not to. Like Sajid Javid, for example, wants to stand, but I gather Rishi Sunak is trying to persuade him not to by saying that they're just going to fight for each other's votes. Although ironically, Sajid Javid would probably stand a better chance. You know, maybe it should be Rishi Sunak that stands aside, but he won't. He won't. If Penny Mordaunt becomes a contender, wait till her opponents start bringing up her role in Splash and her speech trying to bring dirty words into Commons debate. Not serious. No. But there's plenty. Again, I don't have to worry too much about exactly what Labour would bring up against her. The first problem Penny Mordaunt would have is that the public don't know who she is. That's it. They don't know who she is. Would I consider running the next general election as a Labour candidate? Not really, no. There's no point. This is Tory country around here. There's no point. And also, if I think about the sort of Labour activists in these sort of areas, I'd not get on well with them. I wouldn't get on at all. And I'm not really keen as well. Oh, do you know what I've got to tell? Oh, it just reminded me. You see, all that travel to London be really annoying as well. I have just realised someone asked me if I could go to London next Saturday, and I've tried to look it up in the logistics. Like, no. So I don't think being an MP would suit me. I'm better off just being a gobshite. I don't have to leave home to do that. The Express like her, or say their readers do. I mean, the Express always, when they say their readers approve of a thing, always look back, because they've always written an article telling their readers what to think, and then they get some comments from them, and then they cherry pick the comments from the readers that agreed with what they were told to think, and then they say Express readers think this. So presumably then, if that's the case, I've not seen it, the Express have told them that they like Penny Mordaunt. Don't know why. Penny Mordaunt is not really very right-wing. You know, she's quite moderate. She'd be considered on the left wing of the party, quite frankly. But again, doesn't mean that you'd get a moderate government if you were Prime Minister, because the ERG are still likely to call many of the shots. Even if she were willing to stand up to them a little bit, there's only so far she can go. You say West Street in centre right. West Street, of course, not centre right. You can argue he's centre-left, even though if you've actually paid attention to any of the speeches he's given on the NHS, you will see he's further to the left even than centre-left. But the idea that any Labour MP is on the right wing of any prominent Labour MP is on the right wing of politics is absolutely barking. Zahawi is launching his campaign next week. I would certainly expect that. I know there's been a little flurry today of announcements. Liz Truss has announced. Grant Shapps announced. Grant Shapps announced. I mean, I got the impression he was getting ready yesterday, but he's now come out and said he's standing. And I did actually joke earlier on because Nadine Dorries is thinking about it. And wouldn't it be hilarious? I can't see a route to it, unfortunately. Wouldn't it be hilarious if Nadine Dorries and Grant Shapps ended up as the final two? So then all these 100,000 Tory members are looking at their ballot sheet and going, so hang on, so we've got to have either Grant Shapps or Nadine Dorries. How does that work then? Wouldn't happen, unfortunately. Neither of them would get onto the final ballots, absolute. Although if either of them could, it would be Grant Shapps. Grant Shapps actually has a fair amount of support in Parliament. Nadine Dorries is just batshit crazy. Who are the ERG likely to back? Suella Braverman. She's already standing. She's announced she's standing. You know, she is the ERG candidate. It doesn't mean to say every single member of the ERG will back her, but she is the ERG candidate. Steve Baker has stepped down to support her. She is the one they're backing. But they may not act in a united way on that. Oh, Zahawi has announced his candidacy, has he? Okay, let me have a look then. Let me have a look. Nadine Zahawi. Let's see what his campaign. Are you sure? I can't see it. No, I don't think he has. No, he hasn't. I expect him to. But he certainly hasn't tweeted about it. And being honest, he would have tweeted. He does tweet. He's on Twitter. It would be on Twitter if he'd have announced it. Don't forget Nadine Dorries. I did mention her. The Darwinian system is bound to pick her survival of the thickest. Yeah, I don't think it will. Anyway, so let's say Starmer makes the no confidence motion. Oh, sorry, I did say I was talking about the no confidence motion. Sorry, I got sidetracked. And Johnson backs the vote and still falls. What kind of fallout would Johnson receive? So, okay, in terms of the vote of no confidence, which I see no reason for Labour not to do, unless Boris Johnson does step down on Monday as Prime Minister, who knows? I'll tell you what I do know is just as on, when was it now? Wednesday night, when Boris Johnson insisted that he wouldn't step down and then on Thursday morning said he would. And I said on Wednesday night that, although that was to the members only stream, I said that Tory MPs would keep working on him. Even if he resisted, will keep working on him. It's the same thing here. They'll keep working on him to step down sooner. They won't ever stop. They will never stop. But if he doesn't step down on Monday, and Labour bring the vote of no confidence against him, obviously Tory MPs are going to back Johnson. Of course they are. And they can easily do it. They'll just say it's Labour playing party politics, being childish. They'll come out, they'll have the lines worked out in advance. Labour will say that the government at the moment is dysfunctional, and that is clearly the case. They are, I mean, look at the appointments at the moment. Boris Johnson right now is making ministerial appointments as rewards, because doesn't matter how long you're a minister, you get like 3 months severance pay. So that's like, for his basic minister, 16 grand or something, and for like a cabinet minister it's over 20 grand. So he's making loads of people ministers as rewards. It's just a nice little bung, because even if they only last a couple of weeks, if they last a few days, 3 months ministerial salary. And that's why Peter Bone, an old Tory MP, never been a minister before, all of a sudden now he's a minister in a job that didn't even exist a couple of days ago. But anyway, so the vote of no confidence. So what Labour will want to do with it is to say, look, the government's not functioning. We're acting in the public interest. The Tories know that he needs to go now so that we can have a functioning government. You know, they're basically saying that even Dominic Raab would provide more stability than Boris Johnson, right? So they will. So basically, it's going to be a case of, on the public, will the vote of no confidence help Labour? It depends who can win that PR argument. The Tories will call it a political stunt. Labour will say they are acting in the national interest because the government is not functioning right now. And it's who the public believe. And that'll be interesting. But it's not a high risk strategy for Labour. It's a much higher risk strategy for the Tories. Because at the end of the day, if the Tories win the argument and people do largely dismiss it as a political stunt, it's not the worst political stunt. At the end of the day, it's a vote in Parliament. They don't really care. So there you go. And the pension, I don't exactly know how the pensions work, whether you get a higher pension as a minister. Clearly you get a higher pension as a prime minister. I don't know in terms of ministers getting a better pension than MPs, and if it depends on years of service, I've no idea, I'm afraid. So, although the usual way to get a nice pension when you retire from Parliament, from the House of Commons, is to be kicked up into the House of Lords. You do have to turn up to get your money, you don't just get it. But, you know, if you live in London, you only have to amble across and have a little sleep in the benches and you get paid a few £100 a day. Has Andrea Jenkins given the opposition parties a free election advert? Yeah. So for those who don't know, she basically swore non-verbal communication via the middle finger to members of the public as she went into Downing Street yesterday. Now, she is claiming that it was a baying crowd hurling abuse at her. I'll tell you what it actually was. I'm not going to deny, there may have been the odd comment, but I'll tell you what, it didn't get picked up on the microphone. But I'll tell you who was in that crowd. People holding up pictures of people who died of COVID, particularly in care homes, that the Conservatives claim to have thrown a protective ring around. So basically, she stuck up the middle finger to grieving families of people who were sacrificed in care homes to COVID. So yes, the Labour will, or who, I haven't actually checked out her constituency. I don't know whether it's a Labour or Lib Dem target seat, but whoever has the best chance of unseating Andrea Jenkins, and I know she's a Northern MP, so it's probably more likely Labour. Whoever unseats her, in fact, it must be Labour. Didn't she take over from Ed Balls? Is that right? Did she beat Ed Balls? It must be Labour that would go for it, if that's right. I think it is. And so Labour will surely use that on their campaign leaflets. This is your MP and what she thinks about the members of the public. They can even point out that she gave this one-fingered salute to grieving families of COVID. Ed Balls, I'll see it, John. Thank you. Yeah, I thought it was. You live in London, surely you should be in the House of Lords. No, it doesn't. You've got to be a Tory MP first. While you can, because as I say, Keir Starmer is very keen on reforming the House of Lords, which basically means getting rid of all the unelected parts of it. I suppose, though, it's not like we say abolishing the House of Lords. It wouldn't really be abolishing it. It'd be like you'd still need another chamber. It's just that it wouldn't be unelected lords voting in it. I'm actually happy to have unelected lords as part of it, to, you know, if they've got some level like law lords and so on, to provide expert scrutiny, but only elected ones to vote. That's what I would do. But anyway, given that they're both in this cycle, however, the one thing that the Tories are now tainted with as a result of voting for Boris Johnson is that they're now the party of the first ever. I might have missed a thing here. Oh, right now people are voting Labour because they're anti-Tory. I feel this needs to change now. They need to be the party of solutions. Absolutely. I mean, no one's going to disagree with that. Even Labour are not disagreeing with that. They don't think, like, It's not the case that Labour are going, well, we've got policies, people should know about them. You know, they are aware that they haven't presented their offer to people yet. They are keeping their powder dry on it. But I'll tell you what I would say. Keir Starmer has always said he is getting the party ready for an election in 2023. Now, I don't think there's going to be an election in 2023, but the parliamentary wisdom is always that you have an election 4 years into the cycle, because the government doesn't want to risk having it after a full 5 years, because then if something goes tits up with the economy, you can't delay it any further. Whereas if you get to your 4th year, you plan to have an election in the 4th year, then something goes wrong, you then put it back for another year. So Keir Starmer has always said he's getting the party ready for 2023. Well, if he's getting it ready for 2023, that means that this year's party conference, he needs some major announcements. So we'll see if they come. Hi, Michael. Nobel Peace Prize winners for Lords only. They have to really do something amazing to get the job, not this nonsense. That may limit us somewhat. And also, didn't the European Union win the Nobel Peace Prize recently? I don't think Brexiteers would like the idea that the European Union would be eligible for a seat in the Lords. But anyway, they're saying, I'm looking forward to Bojo actually leaving office. He said he's going to resign, but he's yet to actually walk out the door. So get a move on, Boris. I just leave it as it is. The way I look at it is this: he is going, and the longer he may not drag it out. He may be persuaded to go on Monday. I don't know. I wouldn't bet on it. But the longer he drags it out now, the more damaging it is. Have you seen the latest poll? I actually should have prepared a thing for them. The latest polls are, and I mean YouGov polls. I always say there's lots of polls out there, and not all of them are terribly accurate. YouGov, Ipsos Mori are the best ones. YouGov, I find, when you compare their prediction, their forecast rather, with actual polls, tend to be the most accurate. And their methodology is certainly very impressive. Even they, like when other polling companies said, oh, there's this massive gap between Labour and the Conservatives, even YouGov now have a massive gap between the Conservatives and Labour. I say massive, much more massive than it's been for many, many years. So my big fear is always when Johnson goes, the Stockholm Syndrome kicks in and the Tories get a big bounce back in the polls. They will get a bounce back in the polls. How big a bounce back depends on who they go for. There are some candidates that will have a better rapport with the public than others. But I do not now think, I'm not that worried that they'll get a massive bounce back. I think they'll get a bounce back. Obviously, Labour do need to use this summer to make sure they sort out their offer. They have to announce something big. Zahawi owns YouGov. He did set it up. He's one of the co-founders. He doesn't anymore. But it doesn't matter. There's no, I know there was a bit of a suggestion a month or so ago, but it's totally unfounded. They don't pass stuff to him for him to fiddle before they put it out. If they did, I wouldn't regard YouGov as one of the pollsters to look at, because it wouldn't be accurate, would it? So ignore who owns various polling companies. At the end of the day, if I went to a butcher's owned by a Tory MP and I asked them for some steak, I reckon I would get steak off them. You know, just because they're a Tory MP doesn't mean that what they're selling isn't quality. You know, it's fine to be critical of it. At the end of the day, they want to make money. The reason they use these things is to make money. And as I say, if any polling company, you don't go for a polling company because it's backed by someone on the left or the right. You go because it's accurate. If you look over a series of public polling, not always general elections, sometimes local elections and so on, which ones are producing the most accurate results, you go. So I'm quite happy with them. But anyway, how How many more scandals will he cram into the next 6 to 8 weeks? Well, to be honest, they probably won't bite as much. I mean, I know the Times are plugging another one, and a Me Too moment with Boris Johnson taking advantage of a young lady when he was Mayor of London. I strongly suspect they won't have as much bite now because he's going. At the end of the day, the scandal is greater for someone in a position of power. Once they've left that position of power, most people go, well, they've gone now, leave them alone. So I think it'll probably be okay. Unfortunately, because every scandal is, of course, really bad for the Tories. But, you know, at the end of the day, if the admission of getting drunk with a Russian spy at the height of the Salisbury poisonings was not a massive scandal, I don't think Johnson's going to face any more massive scandals, unless, of course, he is stupid enough to stay on as an MP and the Privileges Committee carries on its investigation, because I see no reason for them to stop. Why would they? You know. Do I think they'll get rid of the next leader and bring back Boris if the next leader doesn't rate well? No. Once a leader has lost their popularity, that is it. They're gone. Yes, you can sometimes have prime ministers who lose power and come back. Winston Churchill, for example, in relatively modern history, lost power and then regained it. But he didn't lose popularity. He lost power in 1945 because the country knew that ultimately they needed a Labour government to recover. You know, there needed to be that social settlement that Conservatives under Churchill were not offering. It was purely about the offer, nothing to do with the personalities. Boris Johnson has personally pissed off the public. He will never granted, sometimes with the passage of time, some people think a little bit more kindly, but he will never regain that popularity. And also, when enough time's passed as well, history will view and judge Boris Johnson's legacy very harshly. Very harshly. I mean, I'll tell you how bad Boris Johnson is. He makes people like me wish we had people like pissing Margaret Thatcher back. For Christ's sake, that's how bad he is. Wanting to write a book about his experience as Prime Minister, but then who would say they would publish any of his book of his, given it would be chock-a-block with lies? It would, but it'd make a lot of money. You know, if you're, I've got, do you know what? I've got zero doubt. In fact, I'll bet you right now there's at least one publisher dangling a big tasty carrot in front of him as an advance to write memoirs. You know, it'd be lovely to think that no publisher will touch him. They will. They'll snap him up. And if a British one didn't, an American one would. Wouldn't it be mad if the reason for all this spy stuff is why he's still in number 10 under low-key house arrest? Yeah, I don't think that's actually happening there. Question. So Ben Wallace is out. Do you think this is a signal that someone more extreme like Braverman or Patel is in line? Well, okay. Ben Wallace, out of all the credible contenders, and he was a very credible contender, is the most sane, right? He's the most normal. That's not to say he's ultimately decent. I can't bring myself to say any of them are decent because they all backed Boris Johnson. And Ben Wallace backed Boris Johnson even to the end. He was not one of the ones who was trying to persuade Johnson to go, right? So I cannot consider Ben Wallace to be decent. But he was at least normal. He was at least sane. In fact, let's see how many people believe this. A few years ago, Ben Wallace described Jeremy Corbyn as a kind man and that people should basically get off his back. Do you believe that? Ben Wallace said that. 2016 it was when Jeremy Corbyn was leader. So Ben Wallace basically is quite... Can you quote me on wishing we had Margaret Thatcher back? It's a relative term. I don't wish we had her back as such. It's just compared to Johnson, I would take her in a heartbeat. You know, But yeah, Ben Wallace is a normal guy. He would be we wouldn't suddenly get decent government back because the Tories aren't decent. They're not decent, and a leader can't make them decent. But it would be less extreme. It would be less reckless. It would be more respectful. But he's not standing. That means by definition, whoever does win is going to be crazier than he is, because he was the sanest of the credible options. I know there are some others like Tom Tugendhat that's standing, but he's not going to win. He's really not going to win. You know, Jeremy Hunt's not at all decent. He's more normal as well, but he's definitely not decent. If you look at his time as Foreign Secretary and Health Secretary, there's nothing really to be said for him, other than again he has a bit more respect for the political process, the political system, but he's not a decent man. I mean, not psychopathic. Well, there is that as well, yes. In terms of the credible contenders, I mean, like I say, without knowing who will end up on the final ballot, I don't know. But obviously, Rishi Sunak, bizarrely, it is. I couldn't believe it, that he would be still considered credible. You know, he's messed up as Chancellor, so that I cannot begin to describe how bad his spring budget statement was. It was a career killer. Even Tories were looking at it and going, is that it? Is that all you've got? He shouldn't have a cat in hell's chance of winning, but he might. So Rishi Sunak somehow is a credible contender. Liz Truss clearly is. Nadhim Zahawi's got to be an outside chance. It's really, I'm scratching around to think. Sajid Javid maybe, but the thing is, Sajid Javid and Rishi Sunak are going to have to come to some sort of accord, because otherwise they'll beat them. They are fighting for the same votes, and they'll knock each other out if one doesn't stand aside for the other. And I really don't see Rishi Sunak standing aside. As far as I'm concerned, he's in Parliament to become Prime Minister. That's it. You know, he's an incredibly wealthy man. He's not in Parliament. You know, we know he's not in Parliament to help the country, because he hasn't. To help himself. Now, the best thing I could say about Rishi Sunak is maybe, just maybe, all he actually wants is his name in the history books as the first non-white British Prime Minister. And maybe that's all he's after. Maybe he's not after fiddling the economy so that he can actually, because people describe him as a billionaire, he's not a billionaire. His wife is the heir to, his father-in-law is one of the richest billionaires in India. So his wife, who is also not a billionaire, is going to be at some point in the future. But he isn't. Well, maybe he wants to run the government for the benefit of his own investments. That's possible. But it may just be as benign as wants to be the first non-white Prime Minister, and that's it done. Interesting thing to note is bookies have removed the ability to bet on a general election this year. I really don't see why. I mean, the thing is, the Tories have a massive majority. There's no need for a general election. They have a huge majority. Whoever leads the party after Johnson's gone has a massive majority. So the only way there could be a general election is only one of two things could cause a general election. The first would be if the party remains split, but this could only happen if the eventual winner really stuck two fingers up at the ERG and tried to face them down. Now, they can't realistically do that because the ERG are terrorists. They're political terrorists. I say that all terrorists are political, but what I mean is they're not physical terrorists. You know, they will hold the Conservative Party to hostage. So that's the only way that the party will remain split, because they will split now. Yeah, they're fighting like cat and dog. Once that leadership contest's over, they'll fall back in line, as long as the leader doesn't try and piss off the extremists in the party. They need to keep them on board. Even if it's at arm's length, they sort of need them on side a little bit, throw them the odd bone. So that's one way. The other way is if they got the mother of all bounce backs and and their polling went sailing ahead of Labour's again. You've got to bear in mind, even before these scandals that rocked Boris Johnson, Labour were already starting to close the gap on the Tories anyway. Without all these scandals with Johnson, Labour would still probably be ahead. Remember, they got ahead before the scandals, and then it was the vaccine bounce that knackered it. You know, Starmer had already gone ahead of Johnson. Then in early 2020, Brexit and the vaccine, all the rest of it. And Labour, what did Labour have? Nothing. They couldn't criticise the government on COVID because that was a non-starter. They weren't criticising them on Brexit. So Labour had nothing. There was actually, in the first half of 2021, no real opposition. And it was strategic. I'll accept that it was strategic, but objectively there was no real opposition. As soon as that opposition started coming back in, and as soon as so as I say, Starmer was already getting back, sneaking ahead before all the Partygate and everything like that. So yeah, it was I cannot see the Tories sailing back ahead. I can see them closing the gap a bit, but not getting ahead. So what Labour have to do is make sure that this summer, because people have already said it, and you're quite right, Labour have been very, very good now at pointing out why the Tories are absolute disasters in government. What they need to do is persuade people that they have the answers to the problems. They've set out the problems. They've linked those problems to the Conservatives. They now need to be the party of the solution, because they win the election when they can persuade the electorate that the Tories are the party of the problem and Labour are the party of the solution. It's that second bit that has to happen, but I think they know it. Whether they can effectively communicate it is a completely different kettle of fish, but I do think they know it. Has the recent decision from Durham been an electoral bounce for Starmer? It would have been a bigger one if Boris Johnson was still hanging around. If Boris Johnson was still staying on, it would have been massive for Labour. As it happens, because Starmer's contrasting himself with Beergate with Boris Johnson, but Boris Johnson's going. Now, granted, if Rishi Sunak won, he got a fine as well, so then Keir Starmer could use it again. But if Rishi Sunak doesn't win, all of a sudden Beergate, it hasn't helped the Tories, but it won't hurt them that badly either, because it's been blunted by the fact that they've got rid of Johnson. They didn't get rid of... Starmer can try and bring it up and say they didn't get rid of him because of this, though, but it'll be a weak argument. Labour's the party of solutions should be their campaign slogan. Maybe. It's not going to be, but wouldn't it be better to keep publicising Boris Johnson new discovered gas, but focus on who else is complicit? Obviously, Labour do need to... It's a bit like, Boris Johnson kept trying to link Keir Starmer with Jeremy Corbyn because he knows that amongst the voting public, Jeremy Corbyn is politically toxic, and that's why he keeps trying to bring him up all the time, and it hasn't really worked. But Labour, it in theory can work. Labour do need to do the same thing. And actually, I'll tell you something else. If Boris Johnson is going to carry on being an MP and he somehow survives the Privileges Committee, it'll be easier for Labour, because Labour will keep, whoever wins, they'll keep pointing out their links with Boris Johnson, because Boris Johnson is now, and I'll point this out as well, Boris Johnson's approval rating in the polls is lower than the lowest it was ever for Jeremy Corbyn. So Boris Johnson is now officially more toxic than Jeremy Corbyn ever was. He has created a much bigger stink, which is only right and proper because Boris Johnson has actually been head of government. Whereas with Jeremy Corbyn, it was largely what-ifery. But there we go. Being a bit of a bubble, has Bojo actually gone proper yet? Well, he's still Prime Minister, but he is going. There's nothing he can do to stop it now. Nothing he can do. The only way Boris Johnson somehow survives is if the Tory party somehow suddenly have a change of heart and decide to keep him after all. but there's nothing Boris Johnson can do. That the Constitution on this one holds firm. Not a thing Boris Johnson can do to hold on to power. You know, there was a fear, and the fear doesn't go away, that we could end up as a dictatorship. You know, you can never, no country's constitution can prevent it under the right circumstances. Very dodgy to have too much faith in it. But on this matter, at the moment, the constitutional position is that Boris Johnson is going to be removed by his party because his party want to get rid of him. Bojo's going to seal himself in the flat of number 11 Downing Street. I don't rate his DIY skills to do that. Do you know what? I keep saying to them, I mean, I don't like going out, and I certainly don't like going to London, but for that, I'll go to London. All they have to do is let me in, point me in the direction of the staircase up to the number 11 flat. I will haul him out. No problem at all. And I'll tell you what, even if I have to kick the door down, I'll cause less damage to that flat than he has with his decorating. But anyway, last couple, then we'll have to call it there. Starmer saying he'll be making policy announcements is my big takeaway from the Beergate speech. Yeah, well, he has to. I mean, he'll always say that anyway, even if it's not imminent, because there will be policy announcements all the way up to the election. When we get to the general election campaign, the manifesto will come out. There'll be stuff in there that hasn't been previously announced. But anyway. Wonder if Boris Johnson will make his own party and take the loons with him. No, he's like, Boris Johnson wants to be Prime Minister. He's not going to be Prime Minister, right? So he's now going to and he's going to retire into serious wealth. He's going to get paid a multi-million-pound deal to do his memoirs. He'll get someone else to write it. He'll just dictate a load of crap and they'll write it into it. He'll get a ghostwriter, right? It won't even be any effort for him. He'll get paid millions for his memoirs, right? He will get paid millions on the speech circuit. Absolutely dream job for him. Making crass, misogynistic, racist jokes to a load of drunk businessmen at like 50 grand a head or something. Maybe 100 grand a head. He is an ex-prime minister, or he's soon to be. So yeah, he'll make a fortune on the speech circuit. In America, they pay buckets in America to listen to some arsehole with a posh English accent talk shit, right? He'll make it big. Then he'll be given consultancies, won't he? Ex-prime minister. Useful man to have on the board of directors. So he'll be paid a lot of money for that as well. Won't have to do a jot of work. It's just the name they're paying for. His contacts. You know, whilst... But anyway. Say we do get a snap election. Would Boris stay as leader, or would they still pick a new one? To stick with the leader they've got. They haven't got time for a leadership election. But remember, he cannot call a snap election. If he were to go to the... Several reasons that the Queen can refuse the Prime Minister's request for a general election. And one of them is that there's a viable Parliament. There is a viable Parliament. There's no need for a general election. There's a party. But anyway, I'll have to call it there. We will be back on again next Saturday, I hope. It was a close run thing, because if I had gone down to London, there would not have been. But I'm afraid I won't be able to make it to London, so I will be here. So thanks.